Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the 13th edition of Apeejay Kolkata Literary Festival. It gives me immense pleasure to host a session that will be giving a tribute to the legend who wore many hats, author, historian, documentary and filmmaker, and one of the founders of Calcutta Film Society alongside Satyajit Ray. We are talking about Chidananda Dasgupta ji. In today's session celebrating distinguished film historian Chidananda Dasgupta, we have with us a panel that needs no introduction. Our first panelist today is an eminent film personality, Aparna Sen. She's the renowned name in the Bengali as well as the Indian cinema. Aparna Sen is an Indian filmmaker, screenwriter, and actress. Our second panelist is one of India's critically acclaimed film director, actor, producer, music director, and cinematographer, who predominantly works in the Bengali film industry. This exceptionally talented filmmaker is none other than Goutam Ghose. Last but not the least, our third panelist is the author of the novel Eastwards, who has translated several books of contemporary Indian poetry into English. Kalyan has long been associated with Indian social service organizations. He has lived and taught in several countries in 4 continents. Moderating this unique session is film journalist, freelance writer, and festival director at the New York Indian Film Festival, Aseem Chhabra. Over to you, Aseem, to take the discussion forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Neeta, and I hope everyone can forgive me because I've lost my voice. But first of all, thank you to the APG Kolkata Literary Festival and Oxford Bookstores. And since you mentioned the New York Indian Film Festival, I just want to briefly mention all the 3 panelists today, Aparna Sen, Goutam Ghose. We have programmed their films and they've come to our festival. And Professor Kalyanda, because he lived in New Jersey, I think New Jersey you were living at, he's come to our festival with Aparna Di. So this is like a familiar gathering, really. I'm really honored. I never got a chance to meet Chidananda Dasgupta because I used to live in the US, but I'm very familiar with his work and I've been following his writings. And so essentially, we're going to celebrate this giant of a man who, it is his 100th centenary. I just wanted to quote what Shyam Benegal said right on top of this book. He said, Chidananda Dasgupta belongs to a rare and fast diminishing tribe of cinema critics. I will rate him as the best film critic we have in our country. This was written when Chidananda Ji was still alive, but I think he still counts as the finest India has ever produced. So I would like to start with Aparna Sen, Aparna Di, for many reasons, apart from the fact that she is his daughter. And I would love to hear from you. Give us a sense of his life, his childhood, his origins as such, and how did he get to film criticism and the film society movement?
Okay. To start with, I would like to thank the APJ Kolkata Literary Festival and Oxford Bookstore for having me here. Secondly, I would like to make a slight correction to what Neeta said about my husband's authorship of Eastwards. He may be too modest to say so himself, but he's also written a book that has won many accolades and run into many editions called No Country. That's his second novel. So I thought I should mention that. My father, I've often wondered how my father got to where he was, because he was born in Cherrapunji, of all places. And he was born to a Brahmo missionary who was associated with the Brahmo Samaj of Shillong. And he was a first generation Brahmo who had come from Chittagong by foot to become a Brahmo. He was originally Hindu. He became a Brahmo and finally ended up being a preacher at the Hazaribagh Brahmo Samaj. But before that, they lived actually in dire poverty. In fact, my father says that my grandfather, who was Gandhian, used to weave thread or, wind thread on his charka. I've also seen him with a charka many times. And my father had to carry these bundles of thread to the bazaar when he was, not even 10, and sell them, and then come back and give my grandfather, who was very strict, all the accounting. And after that, he would go to school. Now, one of the interesting things that happened when he went to school was that a British inspector of schools came to visit. And my father, even at that age, noticed that he spoke English very differently from all the other people, all the other teachers, etc., that they had. And he summoned up all his courage and he went up to the British inspector and he said, how is it, sir, that you speak English so differently, and how can I learn to speak English like that? So this gentleman was very impressed, and then he took out the dictionary and he showed my father how to read the dictionary and how to pronounce words, something that he taught me later himself. You know, he used to sort of coach me in English pronunciation. And my father, like my uncle, and like many young men at that time, was involved in the freedom struggle. My father, of course, never got caught. He was too clever for that. But my uncle did, poor chap, and he languished in jail for a while. But my father, this got known. And at this time, my father was in college. And I think it was in Patna. Anyway, they got in touch with my grandfather and they said that Chidananda is a very good student. We don't want to rusticate him, but if he's going to go and do these anti-British activities, then we have to rusticate him. There's no way we can't. Unless, of course, he writes a bond saying that I will not do this again. My grandfather said, if he writes a bond saying he will not do this again, I will throw him out of the house. So that was my grandfather. Now, then my father came to Calcutta finally to study English at the Calcutta University. And then he got a job. And he got a job at the Statistical Institute, I think, the Indian Statistical Institute. And Kolkata will remember the name of the person who was in charge.
Aseem Chhabra, the director of the Indian Statistical Institute. Right. He was also a Brahmo close to Tagore, and this was the Brahmo connection. He was told to join on Monday.
Right.
Forget about his
on Monday. Satyajit Ray also was asked to join on Monday. Everyone was asked to join on Monday, and that's where they met. I mean, they had met earlier when they were much younger, but they met again, and both of them ended up working for DJ Keema, which later became this advertising agency called Kalyan. And while Satyajit Ray was, he was the illustrator, my father was copywriter, and I think he also did some accounts executive work. Now, at this time, their friendship really deepened. And what happened was, Satyajit Ray was deeply interested in Western classical music and generally music. My father and he used to go to something called Harry's Music House. Goutam may remember that it used to be on Chorungi. And you could go into the cubicles and you could listen to the record. They had these records at that time. You could listen to the record before you decided to buy it, which is, I think, very, very nice. Now they will not allow you to do anything like that. And so they didn't have the money to buy any records. So they used to go in and they used to sit in these cubicles and listen to the music and then come out saying, no, I'm not going to buy it, ultimately. So that's what they used to do. And then Satyajit Ray, I think, also got my father interested in cinema. And I believe they saw a brief encounter. This film called Brief Encounter 11 times.
David Lean. Wow.
They saw it 11 times. And this was basically to try and understand, the shot taking and the beauty. And I found a film that was interesting. He would ask my father to come along, and Baba and Manik Kaka, as I called him, would view these films. And this developed an interest in music. And then, of course, Renoir came to Calcutta to make his film, to first do the recce for the river, and then to make the film. And both of them, along with Chidananda Dasgupta, who was also a member of the Calcutta Film Society, and Chidananda Dasgupta actually also, I think, assisted Renoir. But my father and Ray got very involved with Renoir and very impressed. And Renoir said, how come there's no film society in Calcutta? And then there was one in Bombay then, which was not doing very well and shut down after some time. So they then formed the Kolkata Film Society.
There's a funny little incident, if I may interject, that I have heard several times within the family, and that is when Renoir had come for the first time when he was doing recce. He had some time on his hands, and since truly an open house, he used to drop in. They used to watch films on the long veranda they used to have there, projecting the film on the wall. And Aparna, who was a child at the time, and her sister Ratna was a toddler. She came up with great and asked Renoir, "Why is your?" Because I think I ate some chilies.
Why is your face so red? Apparently, allegedly, I asked him, "Why is your face so red?" Renoir, without missing a beat, answered, "Because I've eaten a lot of chilies." Thus goes the story of my childhood encounter with Renoir. Which Kalyan just something's wrong.
My father-in-law, Chidananda Dasgupta, was a great raconteur, and he would take great pleasure in telling those old stories of how in that veranda they used to watch films, classics like Joan of Arc.
That was much later, though. That was much later.
Yes, Battleship Potemkin and films like that.
Yes, but that was much, much later. That was while when I was about 10 or 11, and we had this house with a long veranda and an 8mm projector. Calcutta Film Society was very much, well on its way, and a lot of members used to come, and there used to be discussions and so on, and films would be seen, and we were not stopped from watching any film at all. Anyway, I think we've talked enough about his childhood and mine, and maybe we should go on to something else.
Kalyanda, I'm very interested. While I was reading sections from this book, Seeing and Believing, Selected Writings of Cinema, right in the introduction, Chidananda Dasgupta ji thanks you because you worked with him in terms of selecting the text and editing the book, etc. Give us a sense of his writing.
Yes.
How, and you're an English professor also, so that's even more important to explain to us that quality. It's just the finest writing I have read in India on cinema, really. Where did that quality come from? And just explain to us what the writing was about.
One of my professors, who was a Pulitzer Prize-winning poet, Anthony Hecht, once said that people forget that prose must be as well written as poetry. Now, it's very interesting. My father-in-law, who started off as an English professor, he did his master's and then his first job was teaching at City College, was very careful about how he wrote, even the most casual articles that he would write. And in Bengali, his Bengali was also fluent, elegant, lovely, in short. And engrossing because it not only sounded good, but it made you think. At the time when I was involved in getting his writings together for this volume, it was the onset of his Parkinson's. His mind was willing, the spirit was willing, the flesh was weak. And that is the time when I had long discussions with him and discovered the origins of his writing. And he always connected, there was an umbilical connection between society, film, music, and all of these aspects. He never left any of those out because film, he believed, was inclusive. It was, in a way, like life itself. And as I looked for so many of his works that were lying in trunks, forgotten in Shantiniketan, some of them unfortunately forever gone because the insects are not very kind in our tropical land. And it was during this time when we were sifting through all this work that we talked about what he considered important, because we wanted, of course, his vision to come through. And he said from the very beginning, he said, it has to be about society. The evolution of cinema is a reflection of the evolution of society. And he put it elegantly and very well. And he did not stop with just India. He was very interested in the influences that came from abroad, influences that should have been noticed more. He was also deeply interested in the other cinemas of India, of the various different parts of India. I know that Goutam is here with us, and I know that he is a part of that kind of consciousness, as is Aparna, in terms of, this spreading of the idea of film societies all over India. Something very interesting happened, and I have to tell you this little anecdote, if you will. And that is, he observed, and we later found it in one of his writings, that wherever film societies were first started, in those places, members of those film societies made documentary films about their own cities, because they were seeing cinema as a way of looking at oneself, in a way, from outside. And so seeing is believing. What do you believe? In today's India, if you think about the relevance of the title, it astounds me. But I'm sure that others will have something to say about this. Goutam, certainly, and please join in.
Yeah.
Right.
Go ahead, Goutam, sir. I also wanted to, Goutam sir, ask you another question also along with this. Since you are a filmmaker yourself, did he ever review or critique your films? The reason I'm asking is because I'm sure he did not review Aparna these films, because that would be
only Paroma.
He did, even though it's a conflict.
Just Paroma.
Acha. But
I'm really fortunate that he had done reviews of some of my films. And actually, Chidananda Dasgupta, I fondly called him Chiduda, so I'll just address him as Chiduda. But before that, I think I first, at the outset, I must thank Apeejay, Kolkata Festival and Oxford Bookstore for remembering Chidananda Dasgupta.
Yes.
The new generation of filmmakers and audience have almost forgotten him. And I thank you very much for remembering Chidananda Dasgupta. He was a very cultivated person. He had a very cultivated mind, as Aparna and Kalyan said about his upbringing, how he got interested in cinema and studied cinema, literature, music altogether. Because he was very well-read person, be it literature, visual art, or music, and of course cinema. And he's perhaps one of the pioneers as a critic and theorist who had shown us the way how to read a film, both for filmmakers and audience as well. How to read a film. That's very, very important, as Kalyan mentioned, that always he had a perspective, a social perspective, and he judged a film in a given context. That's fantastic. And he was very fond, I remember he was very fond of Natya Shastra. Because, he was very fond of Natya Shastra, one of his favorite books.
Yes.
Always, advised us to read Natya Shastra. And as a filmmaker, I can really relate to him because when we were learning cinema, the language of cinema, techniques of cinema, I read many books like Bela Bala's film theory or Siegfried Krokwer's theory of film, Rudolf Arnheim's book, Adebaza's What is Cinema. And because Chidananda Dasgupta knew everything, he read all the books. And when I had any question, I could ask him, please explain, Chiduda, why Adebaza is opposing a certain kind of montage. And his answer was fantastic. He said, look, Baza was not a biased person. He was great intellectual, and he could try to combine the new possibilities in cinema, both keeping montage and mise-en-scene. So, and also about Eisenstein. Eisenstein, as a first reading, it's not so easy. It's difficult. It's film sense and film form. Chiduda told me, look, if you have to understand Eisenstein, you must know dialectics. That's very, very important. Because, Eisenstein's whole intellectual process, intellectual dynamics is based on dialectics. So these are great advices. Also, I remember he advised me to read James Agee's film theory and essays. And another favorite writer was John Barger. He said that, look, Goutam, if you read Ways of Seeing, you find so many visual perceptions. That's very, very interesting because, he had a great mind and understood cinema, my God, unbelievable, from every perspective, from each and every detail, we could explain what is a good cinema. So I think, Chidananda Dasgupta, remembering him is a lesson. I tell you, a book in Bengali, Kalyan mentioned, or Aseem mentioned about his book, Seeing is Believing. And there's a Bengali book he wrote, Boi Noy Chobi.
That's right.
Roughly means, film is not a book. Film is not a book. I think that book, still could be a textbook for film students. It's unbelievable. Where he has covered the inception of cinema, the idea of cinema, and also the history of cinema and the styles in cinema. So it's an incredible book, consisting of a couple of essays, but a very, very interesting book. I would suggest Aparna and their trust to translate that book in English so that people can read it, because it's a very, very interesting book.
I think I'll pass on the job to Kalyan.
Yeah, of course,
like most jobs.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right, Goutam, because it is something that takes concepts, connects them together, and not only that, makes you examine those concepts always. And he does it in such a graceful, inviting manner that it's a pleasure to be taught by him. Yes.
Right.
I would just like to add that as a reviewer, today you were just quoting Shyam Benegal saying that he was the greatest film critic. I have read many of his reviews, and I have never found him to write a review that would decimate and destroy a filmmaker.
No.
Never. He was the kindest film critic ever. He tried always to see what the filmmaker was trying to say. He knew that the job of the reviewer was to interpret the filmmaker to the average viewer and to bring out what the director was trying to say. I'll give you a small example. I saw Buddhadev Dasgupta, whom I admire greatly, by the way, and I feel terrible about his untimely death. He saw Buddhadev Dasgupta's Bagh Bahadur, I think, and I remember that all the sets were very, very sort of painted. There was no weathering done. It was just painted white, and it was looking all very new. And I said to Baba, don't you think that the set should have been properly weathered? I mean, this is a detail that surely a filmmaker must see to. Baba said, I think that this film is more of a fable than a realistic film. So he was seeing something in it that maybe even Buddhadev hadn't. When I told him, Baba, I don't know why I've made the film Sati, because it has nothing to do with these times. Baba said, but it has. But it has. Because here you're trying to show that, what would happen if the way the Hindu fundamentalist forces are going ahead, that if they finally, come into their own, what they would do to society. This is where we would go back. I found it very, very convenient, because every time I was asked about Sati after that, this is what I said.
I remember Chiduda was very upset and concerned about the fundamentalism spreading all over the world, and especially in our country.
And he had a phrase, Goutam, called the unholy marriage between fundamentalism and consumerism.
Absolutely. It's a very interesting dichotomy, fundamentalism and consumerism. And Chiduda was very much concerned. And he had written,
early on.
Yeah.
So while Aparna said that he never tried to destroy a filmmaker, I'm very curious about his friendship and relationship with Satyajit Ray. I happened to see, now this was back in 1990, when Satyajit Ray made Shaka Pushaka, and Chidananda Dasgupta did not like the film, and he was very critical of the film. Can I just take some time and just very, very brief 2 paragraphs I just read.
Okay.
So Satyajit Ray says, such lazy viewing must demote Dasgupta from the position of prominence he has held as a critic for the last 30 years. But your father, hats off to him. He said, it is amusing as well as sad to see Satyajit Ray out with his fly swatter once more to squash any Indian critic who dares to raise his voice. But I'm wondering about...
But they were friends in spite of that, I think they respected each other despite that. And it is true that Ray did not like criticism, but it is also true that Ray, when he saw films, with his family and so on, Sandeep says that it was very difficult to watch a film if he wanted to, because he kept saying, oh, that was a mistake. Oh, that was a mistake. But he never, ever admitted it publicly. That was, I think, a deliberate decision on his part. But my father, of course, was a great admirer of Ray, and he wrote a book that is seminal about the films of Satyajit Ray. And once when I had to do a lecture, the inaugural, the annual lecture at the Ray Society, I wanted to write about Ray, and I found it very difficult to say anything because Baba had said everything before me. So then I had to find my own sort of.
You know, I Gautam, one sec. A film journalist friend of mine told me actually just yesterday that she said that Chidananda Dasgupta had come to speak to them in their journalism school class or something like that, and he talked about the fact that when he made his first feature, Bile Tere, is that how you pronounce it? Okay. He apparently said that it was made because Satyajit Ray had made a comment that critics cannot be filmmakers, and that's how he decided to make the film.
That must have been spoken in jest.
Okay, maybe.
He always believed in a good repartee, to make a film. I mean, for anyone who has made a film, and I've watched filmmaking close at hand, I think only lunatics make film because it's so much work to have to follow up a comment of that kind.
And also,
but if I may go back,
I just want to say one thing before you do. That is, I think that comment must have been made in jest because whatever faults my father had, including a very bad temper at one time, pettiness was not one of them. Baba was never petty. He wouldn't make a film just to prove a point, He wouldn't do that. That was completely alien to his nature.
Right.
I'm sorry.
In my opinion, Bile Tere is a very, very interesting film. One of the finest black comedy made in our country.
I think probably the first one, Goutam. Probably the first one. When I saw it,
it's a very interesting England return, roughly means. It's in three parts: Shar, Bull, Gadha, Donkey, and Blood, Rocto.
Blood.
Very interesting, but full of blood, full of black humor and highly sophisticated comedy. In those days in Bengali cinema, comedy was not so exciting, barring few.
And early for its time.
Yes, absolutely, much ahead of its time, the Bile Tere. I think we must revive the film, and new generation should watch it, a sophisticated comedy. I mean, it's really a sophisticated comedy.
Are any of his films streaming anywhere on Hoi Choi or anywhere? Amazon? Are they available? His other films?
Right. Restoring. I think NFI, National Film Archive, they're restoring Chidananda Dasgupta's film. That's why I'm not wrong. Aparna must be knowing.
Yeah, they have. In fact, they are restoring them, yes.
Yeah.
And also some of his documentaries, including a wonderful one on Birju Maharaj, who just passed away. Never having seen Birju Maharaj face to face, I came to know his work through Chidananda Dasgupta's documentary, and it's a delightful documentary, beautifully made, and it weds his art with the. Sorry,
a young Birju Maharaj.
Young Birju Maharaj. Yes, I mean, full of sap and energy and such grace. Absolutely. But may I return to the point that was made a little while ago about Satyajit Babu and Chidananda Dasgupta, and that is that Chidananda Dasgupta saw his work a distinct, not really as a reviewer so much as an ongoing seeing eye, a critic, a critical eye which weighs and finds the gold and finds the dross and so forth. Now, would anyone in their right minds rank Shaka Prushaka, which was mentioned, in the same league as, let us say, Pothir Panchali or Mohanagar or I'm choosing films from his different Charulata and so forth. I remember once in America, I used to show films to my students, and I was showing Pothir Panchali, and the print was terrible, the black and white, and the subtitles were washed out because they were on a background of black. They were not yellow subtitles and so forth. It was not the one that was restored, the Janus one, Criterion collection, I think. But anyway, I was worried about how these thicker than my thigh. I was really worried. And when at the end of the film I switched the light on, these huge athletes, I had half a football team in that particular class. They were red-eyed, and one of them kind of, had completely broken down, and they said, "Professor, can we discuss this film some other time? Because it's too early to talk about it." It was one of the greatest compliments that I can think of. It was like a silent film to them. Now, that is Shotoji at his best.
Yes. Another aspect I would like to mention here, his great understanding of Indian classical music.
Yes.
I remember at the New Alipur house, he used to teach lessons to his youngest daughter, Lokhi.
Yes. Who was a fine singer.
Before that, Goutam, I remember that when we were very young, we used to live in Ponditia Place, and there was somebody, I must have been 6 and my younger sister must have been 4, and the youngest had not been born. And somebody called Kali Babu used to come and teach Baba and a few other people Hindustani ragas and so on. And I asked Baba, why are you learning it? Are you going to be a singer? He said, no, I'm learning it so that I can understand Indian classical music better. So he actually had a teacher teaching him about ragas and Indian classical music just so that he could understand it better. I mean, he was forever a student.
Absolutely. Actually, their generation, Satyajit Ray, Rai, Chidananda Dasgupta, they had a Renasa mind,
Yes.
And always a learner.
As a matter of fact, I remember, Goutam, I remember so many times, you must have seen this also, how when he listened to music, it was not music at the back of, while he was doing something else. He actively listened to music. And one of the last things, and this breaks my heart to tell you this, one of the last things that I can tell you about him and music is Reena and Aparna and I were going into New York, into Manhattan, to a particular music shop to buy something that he had wanted us to pick up. It was Sibelius's Finlandia.
Let me just tell you a little anecdote before that. I asked him, Baba, what should we get you from America? We were going to America. I know you like dates and you like, good wine and so on. So we'll get you a chocolate.
The fruits.
we will get you all that. But what else do you want? He said music. So I said, what music? You've got everything. You've got Bach, Brahms, Mozart, Beethoven. You've got everything in your collection. What do you want? So he said, no, European. I said, I know European. These are all European. He said, no. That time he was finding it difficult to remember things. He said, no, far northern, far north. I said, where far north? Norway, Finland, I said, oh, Finlandia. He said, yes, Finlandia by Sibelius. And Kalyan and I were going to buy.
And that is the time that the phone call came. That he had passed away. So it's forever etched in my head. And there we were with all the dates that he loved to eat,
With the,
chocolates, red wine, Finlandia.
Yeah, with the notation of India.
Sorry, Goutam, what did you say?
Nothing was alien to him.
I was saying that,
So-
perhaps passed away thinking of Finland, India. That
Yeah, I
could become
know. Yes, yes.
so,
Yeah.
longing for those tunes and those counterpoint. Incredible, for
Yes.
anyway, that's why
And his love of
it's extremely
and you know his
high.
yes. And his love of books. I remember a couple of times when he and I had gone to the Oxford bookstore, and we would spend a much longer time than we had planned to, looking at the books, the new books that had come, the books of photography and so forth. And he would just go, and I would tell him, be careful, there's a step on the left side and so forth. He said, good idea, watch your step, he said. He had a great sense of humor. And he would go through all the new collections that had come up and so forth. It was just such pleasure he took in music, in books.
Art. I used to spend all my summer afternoons poring over his books on art until I became quite familiar with the Impressionists, and I could tell one from the other just by the style, because that's what I used to do. And Baba had all these books.
And I think, as an organizer for a good cause, he had done huge work for Federation of Film Societies.
Oh yes, that is very important.
He himself convinced Indira Gandhi, then Information and Broadcasting Minister, that there should not be any censorship for film society screening. And
oh wow!
Yes,
Goutam, I didn't know that.
Yes, it was his initiative, and of course, Ray was there very much. Ray was very well known. So Ray endorsed his views, and finally, Indira Gandhi agreed that no, there shouldn't be any censorship for film society screening. This is a great contribution.
Yes, indeed. And the Federation of Film Societies, he was the first president.
Right.
Yes, of course.
Right. Yeah. Well, on that note, I think we run out of time. We can keep talking, really. This has been so fascinating, really. And I think I learned a lot. And I'm sure people who will be watching this session will really, really appreciate it. I mean, what a great soul, what a great giant of a human being he was. And we are very lucky that, Aparna Di and Kalyan both agreed. They related to him very closely. And Goutam sir also agreed to talk about it. So thank you, all three of you, for all of these wonderful anecdotes and descriptions of Chidananda Dasgupta's personal life, his childhood. I really learned a lot. And thank
Goutam was also practically related to him because he was always there, Chituda.
Yes, he was very much a part of the film family.
Part of the family, yes.
So this is a gathering of a family then. Yeah.
Yes.
So, and thank you,
Aparna, and Aparna accuses me often that I married her because she was Chidananda Dasgupta's daughter.
Yes.
And there is some truth in that.
I knew it.
What a delightful man. Big heart.
Yeah. It's a great way to end the session. So thank you all. Thank you the APG Lit Fest, Kolkata Lit Fest, and Oxford Bookstores. And especially thank you to all three of you. I really appreciate it. So
you're welcome. It was a pleasure.
Welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Aseem.